Hi, and welcome back to Circles Theory. So this is the video where each week I discuss how the book is going, but I wanted to mix it up this week and try something new. I want to do something a little bit freeform. I've been making a lot of notes recently as I read the works of Campbell, and I specifically want to just kind of go through some of these notes in a really freeform way. This is a chance, and a horrifying one, be that, to see how I'm processing this information and what I've been thinking about. So I'm just going to open up on an entire dialogue and discussion on the mind-body problem and neurological responses and what that means in a circular theory. So let's hop in.
What it's gotta be this time. Yeah. Sun starts to set and the moon should rise.
So I think I start with what is the separation between the mind and the body? This is a classic question for philosophers. For most of human history, the idea is that there's just a singular force. Descartes shows up, and Descartes suggests that the mind is this separate entity, right? This almost brain in a vat, this matrix concept of this separated form that is disengaged at points. And so a lot of theories go through various forms of interconnection, and I find this dualist one really interesting, that these are the consciousness and the body are separate systems that do interact with each other, that they adapt and play off of one another, that the body has responses I'm clearly not capable of controlling. Right, I don't control my blinks or how fast my heart beats or how my body tries to deal with scabbing up a wound, and my consciousness is separate. Right, I mean it's this meta thought, but they do each have an ability to affect each other. Right, my caffeine intake affects how I think and how unconscious I tend to be compared to how sleepy I am, and the different chemicals. All of this impacts my level of conscious thought, but my conscious thought also impacts my body, my stress and anxiety levels. I mean, people get ulcers, and it has a biological response. But what I find interesting is then the concept of the mind, and this is where I tend to take a third perspective of a separate extra system that really is close to the Freudian concept of the id, right? The mind is the moderator between the consciousness and the rest of the body. It works as this in-between spot. And I do seem to think it's separate. There are processes of the mind that are automatic. There are ones that we do without being aware of it. It is really this mediator, this third force. And it's hard to define the mind, right? Like I said, I find it to be closer to the id. It is highly influenced by behaviorist theory. This much is clear, right? I mean, this separate unconscious part of the mind is really susceptible to therapies for phobias, to token type systems, to modification. But consciousness always messes up behaviorist theories, right? They never quite work right because free will, this ability to be aware of things and know that I'm being observed, modifies how we behave. And so there's more than this mechanical hardware. There's the consciousness. So I tend to argue there's the consciousness, there's the mind, there's the body, each engaging in their own loops that overlap and engage with one another. And so what's interesting, the consciousness itself, and I just talked in my Rollo May video on Wednesday on consciousness in a bit more depth. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest you check it out. But the consciousness is what we refer to as the soul, right? This is the heart of the being. This is the culmination of the symbolic understanding of reality. And it constantly interferes with processing, right? It's the AI that's full of bugs, where we tend to take actions that aren't necessarily what would seem the most right, where it's able to understand and mediate the body and the mind's response to a problem isn't correct. That I don't need to scream and have an emotional reaction over this, right? That I'm able to engage and stop and have power over the rest of my autonomic responses. But what's interesting about the consciousness is it's not necessarily that clear. It tends to have gears and gauges. There's a part where we're hyper alert, right? For me, this is 2 in the afternoon after my lunch and caffeine where I am just ready to go. But there's also those times where it's been late. I've been out with friends, I've been playing games all night, and I drive home and I have this moment where I wonder how on earth I got my own driveway, where the mind shifts at gears. Or I walk into the kitchen and I open up the fridge and go, why on earth did I do this? There's different levels of consciousness, which adds to some of the difficulty here. And so what's interesting is I think that this actually equates really well to the Campbellian idea of the hero's journey, that the mind itself goes through this process, that consciousness develops through disruption to the status quo. There's a standard homeostatic way of being, where we are able to shut off, right? When I get bored, I can do a task for a long period of time. I've mastered it, where we can just do it mindlessly. But something new happens, a challenge. And with this, we have to find new ways to collect and interpret data and change our behavior and become someone different. And so this anxiety that spurs out of a challenge that requires interaction through all of the Chameleon steps is how we develop it. I think societies develop in the same way. And we talk about the idea of the magic in the hero's myth, right? Luke gets the lightsaber and Frodo gets the ring. But magic here is interesting because I think magic here is skill and virtue. This is where bravery and courage come into play. This is where those types of concepts become developed. This is where competency and skill and ability to engage in social awareness are developed. These are the challenges which arise and develop that. And so it's interesting. I suppose I wrap up this meditation on these dreams, these magics, these abstractions provide us strength. And that perhaps one of the most important influences on symbols and how we engage and spread our information to other generations. So I think that's where I'm trying to go next for the next chapter of my book. If you were interested in any of this, you're interested in psychoanalytic theory, existentialism, literature, film, anything, stick around, check out another video, like, subscribe, engage. I would love to hear your thoughts. Regardless, I will catch you next week as we continue talking about writing the book, Circles, the Myth of Society.